Hi everyone, my name is Dan Edwards and thank you for joining me for this video today where I'm going to take a look at a little project I put together that allows me to bring in a Excel spreadsheet journal entry into Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. It's going to be working with Excel, OneDrive, and Power Automate. Now, many of you know there is already a Dynamics add-in for Excel, so you can do some journal entries and other entries into Dynamics through Excel, but there are some drawbacks to that, the way it connects, the need to start the journal entry in Dynamics first. So I've been challenged by some prospects that they didn't like that approach. They were looking for something else. So I did some playing around, did some research, and this is what I've come up with. So I wanted to put it together here in a video because there's just quite a few steps. There will be an attached document to this on my blog, danscorner.info. So hopefully you'll be able to download that from there. But in the meantime, hopefully this video will walk you through how to build this in your own environment. So without any more delay, let's go ahead and jump into the demonstration. So I'm going to start the demonstration here in Excel. So not going to spend too much time here in Excel because I'm sure all of you know how to do an Excel spreadsheet and an Excel table, but just want to point out a few things of what I've put together here. So I've got kind of some header information up here where I've got my date, my company, what type of accounts I'm using, ledger accounts. I've given it a name. Sure, I could drop my company logo, things like that on here. But then I have a table. So, that is a key to make sure that this is set up as a table and given a name inside of Excel. So I believe I've named this journal. And, it's got a few columns here. So I've got my date, my company, my account type. Now, these are all just formulas pulling from above. So every time I create a new row in this spreadsheet, I don't need to fill those in. And then I have my main account and my financial dimensions like I'm using in D365. So I can populate those. And then I have another formula here that concatenates that to bring my full account number together that I'm going to use later to import into D365. I have a description that I can bring in, and then I have my debit and credit amounts. Now, one thing you'll notice is I do leave the zeros on the other side. So debiting 100, crediting 200, I have the zeros here. So need to make sure you have those in because I did run into some problems in Power Automate if I didn't have that set up. So this is the first thing I need to do is create this template. So I'm going to create this and then I would save this on my desktop somewhere so we can use it at a later time. Now what I'm going to want to do with this is now when this is ready to be used, I need to send it somewhere to tell it, let's start importing into Dynamics. So that's where I'm going to use OneDrive. So let me go ahead and switch over here into OneDrive. And I think I have my OneDrive files up here. So looking at my OneDrive files, I've created a folder for journal entries, and this is where I'm going to upload that journal entry template. Now, I've just given it the simple name JE here, but when we write the flow, we could adjust the names or have it be any name that we save to this folder. You'll see I've also created a couple other folders here. So once they're imported or if they're rejected, I'm going to do an approval process. They can be saved to those other folders. So the first two steps in the process, create the Excel spreadsheet, then create the OneDrive where this is all going to start from. So now that I have all that set up, it's time to get into Power Automate. So let's go ahead and switch into Power Automate. All right, so I've switched on over into Power Automate, which you can see here is flow.microsoft.com. You need to make sure this is on the same tenant and you're able to connect to your Dynamics 365 through the different connectors and things in Power Automate. Not going to spend any time on that in the video. There's plenty of training out there on Power Automate. So what we're going to start with in this case is I want to do a new flow. And this new flow is going to be automated. I want it to go automatically when I've saved that Excel spreadsheet to that OneDrive file. So I'm going to simply say I want to create an automated cloud flow So this is going to be Dan's import of journal entries. And I want that to trigger off of OneDrive so I can start searching there, and you can see I have a trigger called when a file is created from OneDrive. So I'm going to simply say create, and that's going to kick off my creation. So, and kick off the flow that we'll be using. So when a file is created, where is the first thing it's asking me for. So I can click on the little file folder here, and this is connected to my OneDrive for business. So I can come in here and see when it's created in that journal entry folder. So now it's monitoring that journal entry folder, and it's going to start this flow whenever a new file is created in that folder. So from here, I now need to do some additional steps with that. So next thing I'm going to do is I'd like to get the metadata. So I need to get information about this file. So I'm going to choose to get the metadata file, and I can simply, using the dynamic content, get the file identifier. Now I'm also going to do some approval with this. So I want to be able to send a link to this file out to the manager who's going to have to approve this before it goes into Dynamics. So I'm going to simply say new again, and I'm going to say, I believe I want a share link. Let's see if that will find it. There we go. So I'm going to do an action to create a share link for that same file that we were just looking at. So it's the same file identifier, and I want them to be able to edit anybody in our organization. So now I've got that file out in OneDrive. I've grabbed some metadata from it, and I've made a share link for that file. So now it's time to get that file approved before it goes into Dynamics. Power Automate gives me a lot of options for approvals. So I can simply come in here to add another step, and I can simply search on approvals. You'll notice there's actually some approval actions here: creating an approval, stop and wait, start and wait, or wait for an approval. In this case, I'm going to do the start and wait. There's different approval types depending on if you want some customized responses, if you need multiple people to respond. In this case, I'm keeping it simple. I just want an approval, reject, and only one person to respond. So please review this spreadsheet and journal entry. And in this case, I always want it to go to the same person. For this example, that person will be me. Now I could put in the user's manager. I could go find the manager out of their Office profile, something like that if I knew that information. So in this case, I'm going to put some details in here. So I just kind of pasted in some text, and I do want to put in some dynamic content. So I'm going to go out to the dynamic content and find who this spreadsheet was last modified by, and include that in here as well. Now we also created a web link with our share link above, so I can go ahead and include that, and then I want to include the name of the file as well. So now I've started the approval process, and that will run through the Power Automate approvals, sending them an email or letting them approve this through Teams, whatever the case may be. So now that I have that set up, I need to do a new step, because now I need to do the branches and determine on whether it's approved or not. So in this case, I want to look at the outcome of that approval, and if it is approved, or I believe it's actually approved is the word. If it's equal to approve, then it's going to go down the yes side. If it's not, it's going to go down the no side. So let's start by looking at the yes side. So on the yes side, I'm going to want to start by reading the information from this spreadsheet. So that spreadsheet, now that it's saved into Excel and into OneDrive, is actually in Excel online, so I can go list the rows present in a table. So that's going to allow me to go out and get that information. So now I can find that's on my OneDrive. It's in my OneDrive library. And then the file name. Now in this case, since I'm just setting this up, I'm going to want to actually go out and find the actual file. What I'll show you is later that could be replaced with just the file identifier from above, but to map everything correctly, it's best to use the file name initially when you start. The problem with leaving it that way is they would always have to save the file as JE. If they put any other name on it, it would not be able to read those files. So now I've got it reading the spreadsheet. It's time now to start putting data into Dynamics. So I'm going to add an action here, and the connector for Dynamics is called Fin and Ops apps. So I can just search on the Fin, and you can see what I need to do now is I want to create a record. So I'm going to go ahead and create a record, and you'll see there's two questions here on the create a record. It wants to know your instance for Dynamics, and then it wants to know the entity, that's the data entity. So I'm going to come out here and grab my instance of Dynamics. I have a few of them. So I'm going to make that connection, and then I'm going to come out here and find my entity, and it is Ledger Headers. Ledger Journal Headers. So ignore that error message. It goes away after I get the right entity in there. Now, journal entry name, I could have put that in the spreadsheet, but in this case, I'm just going to hard code that to be a Genjourn. Make sure I put that in right. And then also I could pull the company from the spreadsheet, or I could just enter it here. So in this case, I'm just going to do USMF and put it in from hard-coded, but I could have pulled it from the dynamic as well. Now, that is just doing the header. You can see there's some advanced options. I don't need an integration key. I could put a description on here if I wanted to, but I'll leave those blank. So now I need to get into the line items of the journal entry. But before I do that, there's one caveat. With Power Automate and the way it reads the Excel files, I need to do some adjustment to the values, the debits and the credits, and make sure they're using a floating decimal. So I've got to add a couple actions for both the debit and the credit. So I'm going to add an action here, and actually before I do that action, I need to make sure that it is looping through. So I need to choose an operation where it is going to apply this to each row. So I can do that by choosing the apply to each option, and then I need to look for the values in the table that we had above. So this is going to allow us to loop through. The apply to each is a loop. It's going to allow us to loop through each one of the rows we had in the spreadsheet so that we can adjust those to be a float. So I'm going to add an action here, and this is going to be again a compose. So it's a data operation that we're able to do inside of Power Automate. So I'm going to choose compose, and the first input I want is the debit amount. Now, what I also like to do here is actually rename this. So I'm going to call this compose dash debit. And then I'm going to add another action, which is also a compose. And this is where I'm going to actually write the expression that needs to go in here. So, there's a lot of examples for the different expressions, and in the document I'll actually have the code that needs to go in here, and the code depends on what you've named this step. So the code should look like, in this case, something as simple as float open outputs. Make sure I'm get my mouse out of my way, make sure I'm spelling it correctly. Outputs open, and then it is compose / debit, and then it is a end comma or apostrophe there to wrap that around. So it's simply that information, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the credit side. So again, the reason I'm doing this is to change those to be a floating decimal. So again, I'm going to rename this to be compose credit, and we'll put the credit amount in here, and then I'll do one more compose, and do the expression again. So float, and so you can see float value and then string. So it's float outputs open paren, and then compose credit close paren. That looks good. All right, so now I have all the values. Now it's time to put the line items into D365. So again, I'm going to use my D365 connector to create a record. I'm going to connect to that same instance of Dynamics that I used before. Give it a second to find that. And now I need the ledger. Let me see which one is ledger journal lines. Ledger journal lines. There we go. So now it wants the batch number. So how do I get the batch number? Well, I got the batch number from my create record above. So now you can see in my dynamic content there is the journal batch number. Everything I'm doing is USD, so I'm just going to go ahead and hard code USD. And then I can also get the company code from that earlier create record. Now the thing you might miss here is, now where do I put all the line items and stuff in? That's done here through the advanced features. So now when I open that, you can see we have quite a few fields that we can start putting in here. So I can come in here, and I know I had a description, so I'm going to select that. I know I had a date, so I'm going to select the date field and keep on coming down here. I don't need a document. I need the debit, but I'm not going to use the debit before. I'm going to use the compose for the debit, not the debit from the spreadsheet. So I'm going to use the compose debit, and then I need the account. That is coming from the account number. I've got another date field I can put in here. I'm going to choose that, and then I think I need one more. I need the credit. They're not always in the easiest order, so the credit is that compose too. So now I have entered all the fields that are necessary. Now, I could put in other attributes if there were quantities, if I wanted to put in an invoice number, anything like that, I could choose that information. Otherwise, I can go ahead and make the selection. I'm going to actually hard code these all account types of ledger. So that should be good. And at that point, I've brought in everything I need to start importing into Dynamics. And I may even save and test this if I was building this out in production. But what I'm going to do now is transition to telling my user that I've gone ahead and imported this by building out the email side of this portion. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up, so it just kind of makes this shorter, and that really ends all of the apply to each. So we've listed the rows, we've created the record, we've done the apply to each. Now I need to go in and send an email to the originator of this file, letting them know that it was imported. But before I send that email, I'm going to move the file or make a copy of this file into that imported folder that I have. So let's go ahead and create another action here. Keep scrolling this down and choose OneDrive. And I find the copy file doesn't work real well, and the reason is the file is actually locked open right now because it was read, so it takes some time for that to unlock, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I'm going to just go ahead and create a file, and I'm going to create that file out here in my journal entry imported folder. And I want that file name to be unique, right? So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to actually get the last modified by and the modified time, and then I'm going to get the file name from what we originally had. So I'm going to concatenate all three of those together to give me my new file, and then I want my original file content. So you notice this is the when a file is created section. So my file content. So I've now created a copy of that file into the imported folder. I'm going to want to send a link to that as well. So again, if I look at my OneDrive, I can create a link for this file. So I'm going to create a share link, and it's going to be that file ID that we just created. And I want to be able to edit anybody in our organization. So now that I've done that, I need, to send an email to the original creator. So I'm going to add an action. I don't know their email address. So I'm going to go out and choose to search for users. And I'm going to search for users based on that last modified by person on the original file. So I'm going to go ahead and get that last modified from that original file where we did the get metadata. Now I want to send that user an email now that I've got their user information. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to choose to use email. I'm going to choose this send email v2. There's a few different ways to send email, but I'm going to choose that way, and I'm going to get my dynamic content, and there's the email address that I just got from search from users. So I'm going to grab that. Now you notice it moved it to an apply to like we did above, and that's because it could have been, when it searched for users, it could have found more than one. In this case, it's going to only find one, so we're good with that. And now I can send an email to that user and simply tell them that your spreadsheet has been approved and entered into D365. Maybe give it a little body here. Your entry is JE number, and we have the journal entry number, right? So there's their journal batch number. Your file has been moved to the imported file folder, and the link is here. So now I want to go find a URL. There's the second share link, so that's the one I want. And I want the file, I want the name of the file. So the name of the file, and that's create, yeah, it was create file. So it's that one. So that sends them an email. So the last thing I need to do is delete the original file. But as I mentioned, right now there's what I'd classify as a bug. I know Microsoft's looking at it, that it locks the file open for a while. So I'm going to put a delay on this and say wait for 10 minutes, and then go out to OneDrive for business and delete the original file. So file, when file is created, file identifier. There we go. So that should take me all the way through the process if the file was approved. Now, if the file was not approved, that's where I need to have the no side. So on this side, I'm going to want to let the user know that their file wasn't approved. I'm also going to want to move the file to the rejected folder. So similar to what we did on the other side, I'm going to create a file, create a share link, and move it over to the user. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and create those steps, and then we'll come back and take a look at them. So I've gone ahead and finished the no side. You can see it's simply a repeat of what we did at the end of the yes side, creating the file, creating the share link, finding the user, sending out the email. The email is just a little different, saying it's been rejected. And then I don't need a delay before I delete the file because the file was never opened going down the no side. So now that that's all done, I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And Power Automate will confirm that my flow is ready to go. And you'll notice they recommend testing it, which I would recommend as well. So we're going to go ahead and step out here. And now I've played with this flow a little bit, but you can see it's ready to test. The key is to make sure it's turned on. Since the choice says turn off here, then we know it's ready to go. So let's go over to OneDrive, upload a file, and see what happens. So I'm going to go to Upload Files, and there on my desktop is the spreadsheet. I'm going to upload that. It takes just a second. I don't need to worry about sharing because Power Automate's going to do that for me. So I'm going to come back here to Power Automate. And what's nice is I can kind of monitor Power Automate and see what's going on. And you'll see it is running. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and you'll be able to see kind of how it goes through the process. So I've got 3 green check marks. It's now waiting for an approval. So if I come over here to my Outlook, there is that approval. There's the message that we typed in earlier. There's the link to the spreadsheet. I'm going to go ahead and approve. You could enter comments, which could have also been used in the journal entry or sent in back to the originator. So I'm going to approve that, come back over here, and we'll see the approval has passed. And now it's running through conditions. It's listed the rows. It's created the header in Dynamics. It's going through each one of those steps. It has finished processing, and it's moved to delay, which takes about 10 minutes. So let's go back over to Dynamics. I'm going to go to my favorites where I have my journal entries. And you'll notice I have a journal entry here. If I go into my lines, give it just a second. There are all the journal entry lines that we brought in from the system. Let me click off an account number. There we go. So we can see, there's my sample entry, my another entry. So it all came in, and I think I heard my email go. Sure enough, there's my email. Your spreadsheet's been approved and entered into D365. So what you just saw there went all the way through the process, taking that Excel spreadsheet into Dynamics 365. So hopefully you guys will be able to follow along. Don't hesitate to comment on the video or on the blogs. I will have these instructions on danscorner.info. Look forward to talking to you in the next video. Thank you.